My brother is a deputy, and at the time I worked as an EMT for a few small towns in northeast Colorado. I frequently went on ride-alongs with him while waiting for 911 calls to come in. This took place in Amherst, Colorado. The town is very small. Amherst has about 50 people, a church, some houses, a grain tower, and a park. It was about 3 a.m. and we were about to call it a night. As we were making our last check on the town, we noticed movement at the park, but couldn't tell exactly what was going on because it was pitch black. We drove up and stopped alongside the dirt road, flipped on the spotlight, and as we moved the light around the park, it finally settled on the back of a young girl, maybe 13, sitting on a swing with her back facing us. We left the spotlight on her. She wasn't moving, she just sat there, facing away from us, looking down at the ground. We both felt a bit creeped out and exchanged worried looks. I quickly suggested that we should call her over using the PA system. He agreed, but as we looked back over, she was gone. I mean, no signs of anyone anywhere. The park was in a wide open area. She couldn't have gotten out of sight in the amount of time that we were talking. I remember saying, should we go out and look for her? Maybe she hid behind one of the park toys or something. My brother responded with a simple hell no and drove away. It still creeps me out to this day. Cop here. My partner and I were dispatched to a welfare check. Elderly guy, nobody had seen him in a few days, mail overflowing in the mailbox, missed a doctor's appointment, car hasn't moved, etc. We both know we were about to find a body. We arrived on scene and couldn't get anyone to answer the door. We looked through the window and sure enough, we could see his foot on the floor in the living room. My partner is a corporal, so he pulled rank and made me go first. The door was unlocked, and as soon as we opened it, we smell a mostly fresh, dead body. Almost relieved, we both enter, and he told me to take the man's vitals. He was obviously dead, with lividity, dried feces on him, and dried saliva around his mouth. I stood over him and was about to see if I could get a pulse, when suddenly the man took a deep breath, rolled over, and asked why we were in his house. Completely shocked, my partner and I both started screaming and ran outside of the house. We called EMS and they transported him off the scene. They said they couldn't get a blood pressure or pulse on him by the time they got there, and I heard he died a week later in the hospital. I still get jokes about raising the dead to this day. I work in EMS. This isn't my story, but the captain working overtime with us one day told it to us, and it still creeps me out. The captain was on the first due engine company that was dispatched to a residential fire alarm in the middle of the night. Our dispatch protocols require us to send the first due unit to a fire alarm, while the second due engine and a ladder company respond routine. We respond to tons of fire alarms, and 99% of the time they're caused by a faulty system or burnt food, so we usually don't get too worked up over them. As they approached the neighborhood, they could see the orange glow in the distance, and when they got to the scene, they found a 4,000 square foot house with heavy fire showing on the rear that had already broken through the roof. The call was then upgraded to a working structure fire, and more units were dispatched to assist. The captain stayed on the outside the whole time, in radio contact with the crews that were fighting the fire. After the bulk of the fire had been extinguished and operations were winding down, the captain noticed smoke inside a second-story window and asked the crews inside to make sure the fire hadn't spread to the other side of the house. The crews searched for a few minutes and then radioed back. "There's no room here, sir." The captain was a bit confused, as he was staring at what was clearly a window to a room of some sort. He relayed detailed instructions of where the room should be to the crews inside, and they again advised that they can't find anything. Incredulous, the captain asked the incident commander for permission to go inside of the structure so he could show the crews exactly where the room in question was. His request was granted, so we went inside, walked up the staircase, and headed to the corner in question. There really was no room there, just a hallway in a corner. No doorway, no window, no room. Knowing that there had to be something behind the wall, they breached the drywall and crawled through to find a child's bedroom. The bedroom had a dresser, a desk, and a perfectly made bed that looked as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. For whatever reason, the owners of the home decided to wall off the bedroom and leave it just as it was, untouched and inaccessible. The captain said it was one of the eeriest things he's ever seen. I'm a cop, and this was a real call. I've been on patrol for several years, and I love stuff like this. I had a backup officer with me who witnessed everything. Dispatch sent me to a call in a mountain area late one night. They said the caller reported several people holding a baby over their heads and chanting while standing on our property. The call sounded ridiculous, and I smirked as dispatch gave me the details. I arrived at the proper address after driving about 20 minutes along a mountain road. There wasn't much else up there, and it was extremely quiet. No one walks around out there, and there aren't very many cars driving that late. I walked along a gated driveway through the light wooded area. I found the caller's house with 2 dim lights near the front door. The house was surrounded on 3 sides by heavy woods. I felt a little uneasy just looking at that house. I knocked on the front door while standing on the large patio. I heard something move to my left, which startled me because it was so close. It sounded like a person, something big. I looked to the left and used my flashlight to light up the patio, but didn't see anyone. I continued to knock. I could hear 2 voices inside the house, very clearly a male and a female. This made me feel a little better. Even though I had thought I heard someone on the patio, it must have just been these people inside. The female eventually opened the door. She was terrified, almost crying. She asked me to come inside and to close the door. She led me to the living room where I saw a very cheap security monitor, almost like a baby monitor camera setup, with audio and video playing. The camera setup only provided live feed. The camera was positioned to view the front door and patio area where I had just been standing. The audio was silent as I watched the monitor for a few more seconds. The woman began to explain, but I interrupted and asked where the male was inside the house. She looked confused and said she was there alone. I was surprised because I was certain I had heard a male's voice when I knocked. I asked her several times and initially thought she was lying to me. The partner checked the house and didn't end up finding anyone. The woman said she was reading while sitting on the couch when she heard something over the security camera. She looked at the display and saw 2 people on the patio, standing at the front door. She heard knocking at the door and called the police. I looked at the monitor, and although it was low quality, I could see the patio and front door with decent clarity. As the woman continued to explain, the audio on the monitor suddenly went from quiet to extremely loud. We all stopped talking. The caller was shaking. I looked at the monitor but didn't see anyone. Loud audio continued to blast from the speakers. The audio sounded like wind, but it wasn't at all windy that night. I asked the woman, "What is that?" And she responded, "It's them." I looked at my partner and could see that they were nervous. The woman gave me her cell phone, stating that she took pictures of the monitor, showing the 2 people on her patio. I looked through several low-quality pictures and didn't see anything at first. I continued to scroll though, and sure enough, I saw what looked like 2 tall figures standing at the door. One of them was holding something. The figures looked strange, all dark and featureless, in contrast to the video I saw on the monitor. I was in disbelief, but realized then that she had been telling the truth. I continued to scroll and saw one figure holding something up over its head. Another picture showed the item at the base of the door, with both figures standing near it. I tried to reason, to explain what could have caused these images, but it was pretty apparent that there had been 2 subjects on our patio. We checked outside, walking the property to the tree line. I mentioned the movement on the patio and the male's voice from inside the house to my partner, but they asked me to stop talking about it, clearly feeling spooked. We finished checking the premises and returned to speak with the caller. She said she was going to drive into town and stay at a hotel because she was too scared to stay there that night. We walked along the driveway back to our cars, and my partner jumped into the patrol car and took off. I laughed, but I felt pretty uneasy standing there alone in the dark. I left quickly afterwards. I was responding to a welfare check. A neighbor called in that he hadn't seen this guy for a few days, and the lights had been on for a while. I went and looked around and found no footprints or tire marks in the snow from the recent storm. I checked the garage and found nothing. I checked the house, which was unlocked, and found the guy's cell phone, keys, wallet, and cash with the TV on. That's when I realized that this was now a dead body search. I looked everywhere, in and outside the house and garage. There were several old junk vehicles on the property, but again, no tire marks or shoe prints or anything. I called all the recent numbers on his phone and no one had heard from him. There wasn't much else I could do, so I issued a BOL and we started getting the paperwork ready. The next day, the day shift officer went over to follow up. Turns out the guy was plowing his driveway and must have had a medical emergency or something and either passed out or died on the spot, crashing the truck onto several other junk cars, which then caught on fire, leaving only a pile of bones in the front seat covered in snow. This happened about a week before I got the call from his neighbor. I felt like shit for not finding him that night, but it felt really creepy knowing that his remains were only inches away from where I was searching.